Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of the Legal Beagle podcast. Thank you for being here. Today we're talking with Teena La Moxie, originally from England, now in California, came for opportunity and the land of freedom. What everyone across the globe is told. But she found out something very different, like many property owners. She, through Randy Kelton's Rule of Law Radio, learned to fight back, and she has had a 20-year court battle over her house and banking, mortgage, and even lawyer and even court fraud that she details here. So anyone that owns property or plans to own property, here's some pitfalls that you might need to be aware of. And here's some tips that may be able to help you avoid some heartache. So we thank her for her time. And without further ado, here's Teena. Welcome, Teena. Thank you for being on the Legal Beagles.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me on here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And I see that we have a very interesting conversation today. And you're in California, correct?
Correct, yes.
And why don't you give us a little background on how you got into this before we even get into the topic? What happened? What transpired?
Well, I had purchased my home, which was a triplex. I lived in the front house and had a duplex in the back. Was not in the best of areas, but it was all I could afford. And I wanted to be able to have the bit of a rental income to help pay the mortgage. I always had roommates as well, foreign students and others, which I really enjoyed. I actually pretty much bought the worst house on the block. It was really pretty ugly. And, I just over the time, I refinanced a few times to put a new roof on, redo the landscaping so that it looked like it was a, lived in, cared for house, redid the floors and the kitchen. I mean, this house had been built in the 40s, so you can imagine, how bad a shape it was in. But, I figured over time I can do this, and I really made it my little dream home. It was really my pride and joy. And I used to get people coming by and looking at the garden and saying, "Oh, we love what you've done. We love coming by and seeing what changes you're making." I'd put Christmas lights up all around at Christmas, and people would bring their kids around to see that. And I just loved my home. And I had refinanced to, I'd also got a couple of rental properties. And last time I refinanced was in 2004 to do some major work. And, I was doing okay, but I was led into a negative amortization loan, which at the time I did not know the reality, the true reality, let's say, behind that and what it meant. I thought I did, but the mortgage broker company said, "Well, this is what you qualify because your credit isn't that great." Well, it really was. It wasn't 800, but it was, in the high 600s to low 700s, I believe, at the time. And he said, "This is all we can get you qualified for." And as I needed the money, I thought, well, I can do this. And he said, "You can refinance at any time, no problem." Well, what I didn't know then is that broker got paid $8,000 outside of closing to put me in that loan. And I didn't know that until after it had closed, and I didn't really realize what that meant until I had, was educating myself, and I realized, I could be in trouble here. So I went back to the company and said,
was this a major bank, or what kind of bank was this?
It was First Federal Bank of California.
Okay.
And then I went back to them and said, I really need to refinance into a fixed rate, because I knew, after thinking about it, researching, that if I knew exactly what I was going to pay each month and it was never going to change, then if I had to go out and get another job or two other jobs, at least I knew what I had to bring in without fail every month to, keep things going. If I had to get a second roommate, I could do that and was willing to do that. But they said, well, no, you can't refinance unless you pay us $8,000. And I said, well, I don't have $8,000. I just need to go to a fixed rate loan. Well, no, because we have to get that money back. And I said, what do you mean you have to get that back? It's a prepayment penalty. And I said, but I'm not refinancing with another bank. I'm coming straight back to you. And they said, it doesn't matter. It's a new loan, so you have to pay it. And it just really floored me that the broker would say that. And so I kept asking the bank, because, things were happening and I wanted to make sure, things were okay. They wouldn't do it. So in 2008, again, I just went straight back to the bank, First Federal Bank of California, and started asking them about doing it because people were losing their jobs. I'd had my hours cut, and I wanted to get into that fixed rate loan. So, I was going back and forth with their, attorneys, their bank personnel, and they kept, I would say, putting me aside, giving me excuses. Then eventually they said, well, this is what we're going to do. We'll put you into this loan. We'll take you out of the NEGAM, but we're putting you into a monthly adjustable. And I said, but I need to have the security of a fixed payment. Well, take it or leave it because that's all we're offering you. And it'll get you out the NEGAM. Well, what I didn't realize at the time was the NEGAMs during that start of the crisis were becoming illegal. And so they were trying to cover their butts by putting me into a different loan, but they didn't want to put me into fixed rate.
What do you mean by NEGAMs?
A negative amortization loan.
Gotcha.
Is what a NEGAM is. And that means that you don't pay the full amount, but it keeps increasing and increasing the balance on your loan. So let's say I took out $400,000. By the time I managed to get them to take me out of it, it was like $440,000 and creeping up more and more. So as I learned more, and I asked them to do this, under duress because I didn't have a choice. I signed the loan modification into the monthly adjustable, thinking, well, I'll just keep going and trying to get them to put me into a fixed rate. So I kept working on them and they said, nope, you can't have it. This is all we're going to offer you. But I employed an attorney that tried to help people with this, and he went to the bank and he was stonewalled. And then I think it was in 2009, yes, I was still trying to work with them to get me into the fixed rate. And they kept stalling me. And I had another group that was helping homeowners. They tried to do it and got nowhere. And then I got a letter saying that the bank had been shut down by the Office of Thrift and Supervision, and that it had been sold, and I had to go to One West Bank to ask them. But it was actually, ironically, closed on my birthday in December of 2009. And they said, you have to go to One West Bank to ask for a modification, but wait until January. Well, it turns out that apparently, from one of the letters I got, that they say the OTC, Office of Thrift and Supervision, shut down First Federal Bank of California at 5 p.m. on December 18th, 2009. On that same day, it says that it was turned over to the FDIC, and on that same day, after 5 p.m., it was turned over to One West Bank. Now, that seemed a little odd to me. It does 3 transactions in one day, all after 5 p.m. But I'm just, a little naive, like everybody at that time was struggling to get by, was struggling to figure out what to do, how to save our home, how to do everything. So in January, I called One West Bank, and didn't know them, and I explained my situation. And they said, well, we can't help you unless you're 3 months behind. And I said, well, that would put me in danger of being in foreclosure. I just need to get a fixed rate loan. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for, a principal reduction. I'm not asking for any of that. I just want a fixed rate loan. Well, you have to be 3 months behind. And I said, but, that'll put me in danger of foreclosure. And I kept saying that. And they said, no, no, this is the law. You have to do this. We can't help you. We want to help you, but we can't unless you go behind. So I thought, I've got no choice. I need to get this fixed rate loan. So I went 2 months behind in payments, and immediately they sent me a pre-foreclosure notice. So that panicked me a little, and I was frantically researching, trying to figure out what to do. And someone had said, make that next payment. Don't go 3 months behind because they will take your home. So I started making the payments again, in trying to I got an extra roommate and was figuring this out. And then they just kept adding fees and, inspection fees. And it was every month there was something. And I still kept trying to put in the paperwork for a modification. And then one day they said, I got this call from a Ms. Guzman. And she said, I'm with One West Bank. My name is Ms. Guzman, and you are legible for a loan modification. And I said, yeah, I am what? She said, you're legible for a modification. I said, do you mean eligible? And she said, no, you're legible. And I said, okay, well, what do I do? Well, you have to make this payment. And I forget the amount. It's a long time ago. And I said, well, are you going to put that in writing and tell me where to send it? Oh, no, we don't put anything in writing. You just have to make this payment for 3 months while you're being, I forget the word of it, while you're being evaluated, I guess, to see if you qualify. And I still didn't know all the rules and the backgrounds of the hemp program and this. I mean, it was very complex. And the hemp program was yanked very soon after it was put in. And they put in all these other programs. But so I made the payments because I said, well, where do I send it to? Well, you send it where you send your normal payments. First one didn't get there. And I called and I said, you haven't cashed my check. Well, we haven't got it. And I said, this is where I was told to send it. And they said, oh, no, that's the wrong address. You have to send it here. I said, well, what am I going to do about the payment I already sent? Well, you can cancel that and you can pay by phone, and it costs, money to pay it by phone. And I said, well, it's not my fault that you haven't got it. I sent it where I was told to. And so they eventually, forgave the online fee. And so I said, where do I send the next payment? So I sent that, and that didn't get cashed for 2 months. And then I sent the third payment, and that did get there. And then they said, well, you're not eligible. We made a mistake. You can't have a loan modification. And I said, why? Well, the NPV value isn't there, and this isn't there, and that isn't. And I didn't know how to calculate an NPV value. And I didn't find out for many years that they'd really underestimated the value, because it helped them if my NPV value was low. It was, it enabled them to deny me a loan modification. And I think I put in over 6 or 7 modifications, and I was denied each time. And, they just say, well, you can put in another one. Well, you get so frustrated. And in the meantime, I had filed a lawsuit against them with an attorney. I'd been told he was really good. Turned out he didn't really know what he was doing in this realm. And he later told me, well, as attorneys, we just puff our chests out at each other and then we come to an agreement. And I said, well, that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be working for me. Well, it turns out that lawsuit went nowhere. And, I got it dismissed with prejudice, which I didn't understand what that was at the time. If I'd known then what I know now, this would never have happened. I didn't also know at the time that the contract that One West had signed with the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It actually said on between pages 92 and 95 of that contract, which, it took me a long while to find that on the internet, that they were required by this contract to modify everyone's loans all the way down to 3% if needed, and spreading it out to 40 years if needed. And if it still didn't fit the income ratio that they wanted, then there were other options they could come to the FDIC for to make sure that people stayed in their home. Well, One West Bank didn't agree with that. They ignored that. They just went hell for leather for foreclosure. And I think it was in 2016 that Stephen Mnuchin said that they used the waterfall test to decide whether to modify or foreclose. And whichever made them the most money is what they used. So it was just very frustrating time. And I just kept, being 2 months behind, trying to work with them. And then they said that I had to pay 99,000 and change, to get caught up, or they would go for foreclosure. And I didn't have that kind of money. But I thought, well, and it was an incorrect amount when I looked at the figures. And California had brought in the whole California Homeowners Bill of Rights, which had a lot of provisions to supposedly protect homeowners, but it was a lot of hot air. And that was Kamala Harris's supposed doing. She didn't write it, she just took credit for it. But it really had no teeth because the courts didn't seem to accept it or uphold it. And anyway, after I was working to try to figure out how to bring that, to the point, they sent me a letter saying, in order to reinstate your loan, you have to pay 38,000 and change. And that was only 30 days after they said 9,000 and sent the notice of default.
Now,
I just didn't have it.
Did you talk to any other banks at this time, or you were just trying to deal with the bank that was have your mortgage?
I was just trying to deal with the bank that had my mortgage.
Okay, so you don't have any other opinions
Supposedly.
from other banks?
Not from other banks. I mean, there were people that said, oh, we help people in foreclosure, but the interest rates were so high and the amount they took out of it was just, there was a lot of shysters out there at the time. And I thought, well, I'm sure I could work with the bank. They send letters all the time. We're here for you. We're here to help. This is what we want to do. We want to help our people. Well, those are empty words. You can say it all you like, but if you're sitting there with somebody, who says that, they need help, and you're saying, oh, you have to be behind, this is the law, this is that. And it's interesting because I was reading about one attorney that said, when they say that, you have to be behind, the actual laws that I found out later that California had in place was you have to be either 60 days behind, and this is also in the contract that they signed with the FDIC, or the person has to be in danger of falling behind. Well, that means you don't have to actually be behind. You just have to be in danger. And I was in danger of doing that. And they said, well, no, you were behind when we took over the note. No, I wasn't. You were the one who told me I had to, but they didn't record the assignment of the note till 4 months after they supposedly got the assignment. And as what this attorney said, well, if you're in danger of falling down, if you're calling them asking for help, that means you are in danger. That means you should be eligible to be helped. And that made a lot of sense, because why would you call them and ask them if you didn't need the help? You would just keep on paying, you'd be okay. And then it really escalated from there. 30 days after getting that notice of default, then they said I had to pay $38,000. How could anyone who's struggling come up with $38,000? And then I was just trying a different lawsuit. I tried bankruptcy to save my home. And because they'd sent a notice of trustee sale, which said the total amount due and owing on this loan is $385,465.43. And I thought that was a strange amount because it appeared to be less than what they had told me I owed, a lot less. And I thought it's very specific, and it says this amount includes other charges. So the way it was written said, this is the total amount due and owing, including other charges. So I thought, well, maybe I could get someone to, pay this for me, because I talked to an attorney. He said, if that's what they say you owe, if you've got someone who will help you buy that home, they'll buy it or whatever, or pay it off, go for it. Just do it. So I said to my partner at the time, that, would you help me with this? And, he said, well, what security would I have? And I said, well, we talked to a realtor, actually a broker realtor. So he said, well, if he puts an offer in to purchase the home at the exact price that they want, then he has the security, and he, guaranteed in writing that he would refinance it back to me, sell it back to me at a fixed rate so that I was comfortable and could pay it. And I thought that was a very nice offer. And so worked with the broker to do it all the legal way, put on all the correct forms. And we even offered $366,000, which was slightly more than what they were asking for. No contingencies, just, pay the interest for the time it took to close. So it was, and he actually, because I was out of the state at the time, the broker, took the offer with the earnest money check and all the forms directly to their headquarters in Pasadena, personally delivered it, and then he wrote an affidavit up, signed, sworn that he'd delivered it. And then they said, well, we can't take this. You have to fax it to these people. And he said, well, I've already personally delivered it. Why don't you send it to the other places? And they said, well, don't tell anybody these names that you're faxing it to. You're not allowed to say anything, but here's where you fax it to. So he duly did that and was working with them. And we kept hearing nothing, nothing, nothing. Then about a month and a half later, they said, well, we can't take this short. Oh, no, they said, you have to fill in a short sale application. And the broker said, but this is not a short sale, because this is the exact amount that you have put that is due and owing on the notice of trustee sale, which you recorded in the public records. And they said, well, no, this is the way we have to do it. This is our system. And he said, but it's not a short sale. Well, we can't accept it unless you fill in these documents and have them do this. So we thought, okay, we'll do this. Then another month goes by and they said, well, we can't accept this. It's too close to a foreclosure sale, so we can't negotiate a short sale. He said, you're not negotiating a short sale. This is what you said was due and owing. And there's no contingencies, just let's close this. And there was also a proof of funds letter from Wells Fargo Bank saying that this person had more than enough to pay this amount off. So we crossed every I, we thought, and everything, crossed every T and dotted every I, but it still wasn't enough. So I scrambled the day before this foreclosure sale. Bluetooth is falling out. I had to file bankruptcy because I didn't know anything else to do it. So I did that. I had to pay an attorney, and we do this all the time. We can help you save your home. But they were really only interested in the money, and just doing it as quick as you could. They would call me at odd times of the night, 7, 8 o'clock at night, asking for information, and I would always try to give them what they needed. It stopped the foreclosure sale that day, but then the bank had to put in their proof of claim. Well, it's really odd because this is 3 months almost to the day when they'd stated in the notice of trustee sale that the total amount due and owing, including other charges, was $365,740 plus 43 cents. the proof of claim said it was $507,076, something like that. But it was over 507,000. How does it go up 142,000 in 3 months? I mean, the payment monthly went from between 1,200 and 2,200, and every month it was different, which was why it was a stressful time. So I tried to get the attorney to challenge that proof of claim, and he said, I'm not going to do that. He said, there's nothing wrong with it. I said, have you read it? Did you see what they put in? He said, no. He said, I can't do that. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to do that. I said, you're supposed to be helping me. And he said, well, the bank's right. There's nothing wrong with that proof of claim. So I said, well, I had a witness on the phone with me talking to him, and he knew that I had the witness on. And she was shocked. And he said, well, we'll just do this. He said, you'll agree not to fire me, and I'll agree to just go through this, but we're not going to challenge the proof of claim. Well, I was shocked. And so I did fire him because he wasn't working for me. And I'd been talking to someone else, and they said, I have the best attorney for you. You need to go to a Chapter 7. They've never lost a case yet. And this is what you need to do. I'll introduce you to her. So I went with that attorney because I put in my own challenge to a proof of claim, but didn't have the knowledge of how to further that. Because I was completely naive on the legal system. And I thought, when you hire an attorney, they're really on your side. They work for you. Well, that's not true. And many of the cases.
Right.
It's quite an education. There's a reason they call them lying lawyers. So I went with this other attorney. I'd also, with the help of a paralegal, put in my own lawsuit, pro se, against the bank, trying to figure out how to challenge all the lies, all the fraud, because they would never give me a copy of my note. They said, no, you're not entitled to it. We're the investor. There were many, many lies on the statements. We're the investor, we're the owner of your note, we're a debt collector, we're the subservicer. Well, which of those statements is true? I can't tell. You have to tell me. You're the one who's perjuring yourself every time you send a letter, contradicting what you said the last time. So anyway, this attorney put me into a Chapter 7, and she convinced me, said, this is the way to do. We challenge it. This is how we do it. We do this, this, and this. And I've never lost a case. Well, you think that you could trust someone like that, and you're not really sure because you don't know how to do it yourself.
Why do
Well,
I
it
have a
turns out
feeling why do I have a feeling you're going to be the first case she lost?
You're right. I was the first case she lost. Well, at least that's what she said.
Right.
But she didn't put papers in time. She blamed her assistant, and then she didn't file them correctly online. And then she said, "Oh, and sent to the court. Well, I thought it was in, and I sent my assistant down, and they said they'd done it. Then I sent another attorney to put this in, and it didn't go, and it was dismissed. It was denied, and they got a lift of stay. And then the judge said, well, it belongs in this other court. So at least it didn't get foreclosed, but at that time, but they had the lift of stay there. So I'm going up against, a huge bank and a huge law firm on my own, nervous, trying to do everything with the help of somebody to help me write the legal papers. And it just went on, and the judge just dismissed it. He never even let me, well, the bank, first of all, transferred it from state court to federal without putting all the correct papers in, without doing the correct procedure, which I had pointed out to the courts, and they didn't make them do the correct procedure. They didn't make them put their proof of their insurances or anything else that was required.
Did you
And
did
the
you have
judge just
did you have federal claims in here that the reason they sent it to federal court, or what was the
apparently so. Apparently so. I didn't realize at the time, but there were a couple of federal claims. Because everyone says, oh, you need to put this in federal court because it's better than state court. Well, I thought, if the bank removes it to federal court, it must be better for them. And of course, in good old California, as we've affectionately called it, because the judges' pensions are tied to mortgage-backed securities, for one thing, and they just, tell homeowners, you're all deadbeats, you just want a free house. Well, no, I didn't want a free house. I was willing to pay for my house. Here's my offer. Here's this. Here's that. All I wanted was a fixed rate loan. Is that so hard to ask for? Is it so hard to give someone a fixed rate loan when they're asking for it? They know that they can go and take two more jobs, whatever it takes to pay. But it turns out that my home had equity that I'd worked so hard for, and they wanted it. They wanted my home because they got the homes for pennies on the dollar, when they bought the bank, or at least they bought the assets of bank, so they say. But they actually bought the servicing rights, not the assets, it seems. But I didn't find that out till later. But anyway, I'm in this lawsuit, and the judge just keeps denying me. I even defaulted the bank's attorneys at one point, and the judge just said, overturned it, no problem. Because they said, oh, well, it was inadvertent mistake, we didn't mean to. Well, your attorneys, they have a staff of 220 at this law firm, and they couldn't get the dates right. But the judge says, no big deal, overturn it. He never, ever let me go in front of him. He canceled all hearings the day before, and he just ruled for the bank and just denied me, said, my claims are frivolous, done. I appealed it. The judge didn't even sign his own order at that time. He was too lazy to sign his orders. But I appealed it. The appeal court said it's frivolous. He said, and I was appealing.
Was he too lazy, or did it give him liability if he had signed it?
That's a good point. I had not thought about that point, but it could be. But I guess they think that all their orders are just processed, no problem. Pass them through. The judge's stamp is on it. The clerk stamps it. And I asked her about the signature. She said, oh, if we stamp it, it's as if it's been signed. It means it's been signed by the judge. Well, no. It says there's a signature spot here for the order, and he hasn't signed it. Well, once I've stamped it and filed it, it's considered signed. Well, that's not what the law says. But I was appealing it, and I'd already been granted informal pauper status, which means that you don't have the money to pay the filing fees. You have to fill in all these forms. They review them. So I filed again in the appeal court, same thing, I'm former paupers. And they said, well, I don't believe you're indigent, and this is a judge who's earning over 150,000 a year. So what does he know about indigency? He doesn't know if someone can't afford something or other. He's just sitting high, mighty pretty, getting his salary. And they said, well, if you don't pay the fee, we're not going to even look at it. And even if you do pay the fee, then we may, dismiss it anyway. So there I am, trapped. If I don't pay the fee, they're not going to look at it. If I do pay the fee, I am struggling, and they still may say no, but I don't have a choice. It was extortion by the appellate courts. So I paid it and, wrote in my stuff, and they denied it anyway and said, it's all frivolous. Well, there's nothing about my rights to keep my home that is frivolous. How can they say it's frivolous? But they do. So I just kept fighting and fighting and trying to figure out. I filed another lawsuit, this time with an attorney who actually wrote that. Well, I went through a few things first, and I tried to, do a lot of things. But it turns out someone, and I'm not sure who, but I have my suspicions that it was the bank. They went and foreclosed in 2015, and I was trying to file a second bankruptcy, which to try to protect that. And what happened is they claimed that I had transferred my property to someone else, which I had no idea who this person was. I had not transferred my property to anyone, did not know you could even do that at the time. And they had put a motion into this person's bankruptcy on the day the bankruptcy was dismissed. They put a motion in, and to lift the stay. Well, the bankruptcy was already dismissed because that person apparently didn't turn up. They said they sent the notice to me, which I never got, because what happened is I was living, elsewhere at the time, trying to find some work. I'd already put in a change of address officially with the bank and said, because also I'd been having mail stolen. So I thought, well, let's put in this change of address. Let me get a PO box and everything. And so the bank accepted that I'd put it in February. They accepted it into their system in March. And so according to the contract that I signed, the note, if all notices have to go to the property address on record, unless the borrower puts in a written notice of change of address, and then it must go to the last known address on record. The last known address on record was this address that I'd put in for them to send all documents. But no, on this one, they didn't do that. They sent it just to the home, not certified, just first class regular mail, which we all know the mail doesn't always get to you. It's not guaranteed to get to you if you send anything first class. They just do their best. And it's interestingly enough, while they were doing this, another of their law firms had sent papers during my initial bankruptcy to the correct address on record, to the address that was on the bank's records. And they'd sent certified and regular mail. So they obviously knew which was the correct address to send mail to me. And so I didn't get this, so I didn't know they'd file this notice. And the notice was to get what they call an in-rem, which means it's a lawsuit to protect them and disallow any bankruptcies on that property. So it took away any bankruptcy protection you might have and allowed them to foreclose without notice, do anything. So apparently I learned that they didn't actually turn up at that hearing that they scheduled. There was nobody at the hearing. I wasn't, obviously, because I didn't know about it. And it's interesting because I was still in my regular bankruptcy, going through that and the lawsuit, and I had an attorney. They didn't notify my attorney. They didn't notify the bankruptcy trustee that they said that I had fraudulently transferred my property without their permission. You'd think that if they really thought that, they would be jumping up and down and screaming at the top of their lungs, hey, this person should be denied this bankruptcy. She is, she should not be in this lawsuit because she did fraud, transferred her property. No, they kept quiet. When they have a duty to speak, they kept absolutely silent. And according to the rules of court, that if there's a related case, you have to notify all the courts and anything of any related case. But of course, they didn't do that. So then there was a second hearing, which again, I didn't get the notice of because they only sent it to my property address, which I was temporarily away from.
And this is still in federal court or a different federal court under a lawyer now?
No, this was in the bankruptcy court where this person was at, and she'd filed in there. So this was all done within that bankruptcy, which is federal, of course, but it's the federal bankruptcy.
Right.
And so a bankruptcy court, although it's federal, is very different from state court and federal court. So I'm desperately trying to file something saying, for a second bankruptcy protection. I did file it. I sent it to the bank, and they said, "Oh, well, we don't have to take notice of that because we know there's something we have that allows us to go forward with it." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, you'll have to talk to the attorney. So I tried to talk to them, and they wouldn't answer me. They wouldn't respond. So this foreclosure went forward, and I was like, "How can this happen? I've got the 30-day protection." And so I have another, attorney that time is trying to help me. And they said she was shocked. And so we tried to file to get that overturned. And you saying that, that I had 30-day bankruptcy protection. And the attorney said, well, didn't your client tell you she transferred her property? And we had an in rem and we had this, and she didn't turn up for the court hearings. Well, it turns out they didn't turn up for those court hearings either, because every bankruptcy hearing is recorded. So I managed to get transcripts of them. Their attorneys never turned up. There was no appearances. Really? You set a court hearing and you don't turn up? Doesn't that really lead you to believe that you knew that I wouldn't turn up because you hadn't notified me at the correct address? And you hadn't notified my attorney of record? You hadn't notified the original bankruptcy trustee? You hadn't notified the court that I was in another hearing? You just went ahead and deliberately deceived me and everybody and finagled this in rem. So that attorney tried to help me, overturn using a 60B4. When we went in front of the judge would not let me speak at all. And of course, she just believed the bank's attorneys and said, well, you're not credible, because there's such a thing as the mailbox rule. And the mailbox rule is a 120-year-old rule. And what it says is that if there is a proof of service submitted to the courts or any other place that's needed that says they have mailed you this notice, you are deemed to have received it once they say they put a proof of service in. Well, maybe 120 years ago, that could be true, but we have a lot of people who steal mail, throw it away, they couldn't be bothered to deliver it. And in my town, there was, a legal case about, a mail carrier doing that very thing. It's all over the country. There's lots of cases. Well, that is also a rebuttable presumption rule, which I had helped to rebut that presumption. I put in a sworn signed affidavit saying I had never received this. And the judge says, well, you're not credible. Well, of course I'm credible because I'm over 18, never been convicted of a crime. So you can't say I'm not credible, because that's the very definition. And the rebuttable presumption is that they have to prove they sent it to the correct address. And they said, well, in another lawsuit, you said this is your principal residence. Well, it is. But I don't have to live at my principal residence 365 days a year. I could go away on vacation. I could go look for work somewhere else. I don't even have to get mail at my current residence. Lots of people, including attorneys, they have mailboxes. They have all kinds of things where they don't get mail at their home. They get it somewhere else for safety's reasons. And the judge says, well, if you said that this is your principal residence, then you're deemed to have received that letter. So they, it was just the odds were stacked against me every which way, because whatever the attorneys say, they believe. And I later found out that the proof of service for sending those notices, and this is another oddity, the home is in California. The attorney group that was actually sending those notices and filing them and everything was in San Diego, California. The proof of service was signed by someone in Texas. Now, why is that? Why do you need someone in Texas to send the proof of service that you'd send us? And there was two proofs of service. And on a proof of service, you have one line that says printed name. Then you have another line that says signature. Well, what would you think to that? Wouldn't you think that you print your name there and then you do your regular signing? I mean, that's what that means to me, doesn't it to you?
Makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. Well, on this one, this is a rubber stamp name on the printed name. That's fine. Then it's the exact same rubber stamp name on the signature line. And then on the second proof of service for the second one, it's the same name, same person, same rubber stamp, slightly different stamp though this time. One is in all block capitals, the other one isn't. And the rules of electronic signatures are, if you're the person filing it, then you have to have, your signature has to be unique if it's an electronic signature. Unique to you, and you have to have an actual signed copy on your records, but you can
That-
submit the electronic one.
And
But this isn't the
do you think they forged those documents, or did you find that out later?
Well, I think the documents they submitted to the court, where it says there was 2 grant deeds that I had signed my property over to 2 other parties. Those are forged. Those are
And
absolutely forged.
and at this point, you don't even know who you signed your property over to?
No, I have no idea who they were. I didn't sign it over to them. In fact, I submitted proof to court that on the one signature where it says I'd signed my property over, I wasn't even in the state. I was, taking a very sick friend. We were taking her on a last vacation type thing. She was, she was dying of cancer. So I was nowhere near where they said I'd signed it. And there was a notary stamp on it. And the second one was the same thing. I'd never been there. I couldn't have been there. So, and I'd proven that. And what it turns out, I had hired a legal service to go to the recorder's office to investigate these numbers. And I also called the recorder, and they said, well, this number, no, this isn't right. This belongs to another person's tax lien or something, and this belongs to another person. And I said, well, these have got notary stamps on them. So I wrote to the notaries and asked them for their notary ledgers. They said, we don't have them. These are forged. This is not, I don't do these. First of all, one person said, I don't do these kind of grant deeds. This is not my stamp. This is a forged stamp. And I said, well, how can anyone do that? I said, is the stamp within your possession? Oh, yes. She said, well, it takes someone with a lot of knowledge, of recorder's offices and stamps to be able to do that. What it appears that they had done was lift the number and the stamp and the notary stamp off another document and put it on this document where they're saying that I had transferred the property. So I'm submitting these, and the courts don't care.
And this is the bank, right? Not a government entity.
No, this is the bank's attorneys that were doing that were, pushing all this forward. Now, according to the business and professional rules of, conduct and attorney rules, an attorney is required to make a due diligence check to see anything they submit to court is true and correct. Well, if I could just pick up the phone, call the recorder's office and say, what are these like? Are these real? Because I didn't sign these are false. If I can do that as a layperson and get the answer within an hour, and then send a legal service over to get copies, certified copies of these to show that they were false, couldn't the attorneys do that?
You would think.
You would think. But they didn't. And so they violated their duty and submitted knowingly false documents to court. Now, the reason I know they knowingly submitted these false documents is because much years later, that I'm still fighting for justice and it's still being denied to me all this time. I find, I was a witness in another case. And this was a case where it was the USA versus One West Bank. And what they were alleging through a whistleblower was that the One West Bank was submitting requests to the government for reimbursements that they weren't entitled to. They were saying they did things that they didn't do. They were submitting false documents. They were submitting false invoices. And, because I'd gone to a hearing, a Federal Reserve hearing, and gave a statement about how it was wrong for One West Bank to be selling their bank to CIT Bank, who had filed bankruptcy to avoid paying over, $2 or $3 million or more, actually, fees.
Without getting too far off the topic, what is a Federal Reserve hearing?
A Federal Reserve hearing was a special hearing, and it's put on by the Federal Reserve Bank, One West Bank was trying to sell their bank to CIT Bank. CIT Bank, who I think John Thane was in charge of it at the time. He's the guy who's known for putting in a $35,000 gold toilet into his office and some other, hugely expensive rugs because, of course, he doesn't think his poop stinks. He needs a golden throne to sit on. Um, but they had got, money from the Treasury, to bail them out, as many banks did at the time. But then they filed bankruptcy, so they didn't have to pay it back. But only 18 months later, they have the money to buy One West Bank. And there was a group out of Northern California that put in a complaint saying that One West Bank was, intentionally not lending to neighborhoods, of color, not lending properly to blacks, to Hispanics. They were just redlining, is what they called it, I believe. So they asked for these special hearings, and so and they asked me and some others because they'd obviously seen things on the internet that we'd put in that were fighting all this injustice with this bank. And they specifically asked me if I would come and tell my story, because part of my story too is that between the two mortgage, or the foreclosure services the bank had employed, I'd been sent in one instance, 97 notices of trustee sale in one day. 97 notices in one day to 3 different addresses and to every computation of my name and address they could think of and make up and imagine. And one day I got 87 notices, another day 14, 36, all these different things. And they just made up my name. Now, legally, they can send it to the name of, because it was in the name of a trust, they could send it there and to my name. And they could probably legally send it to 3 addresses to make sure they got the right one, even though they had the correct address on record. But no, they just abused the process. It's like a debt collector calling you 97 times a day. Well, that's illegal. It's an abuse. It was an abuse to send me these.
Harassment.
So I had all my folders. It's a total harassment. I had all these in folders, 5 different folders. Well, I took 2 of them with me, and they were the 4-inch thick folders. So a lot of us agreed to go to this Federal Reserve hearing, which was specifically put on by the Federal Reserve and held in Los Angeles. And the banks there, and there was all these other, organizations there. And it turns out we were only allowed 3 minutes to speak our piece. They were allowed 15 to 20 minutes, but we were only 3 minutes, and nobody responded when we did speak. I was told that I gave a very credible, speech about what happened to me, and I just, they obviously didn't like it because I ended my talk with saying it should be jail time, not sale time for One West Bank. I'm sure they didn't like that part, but it was true. They were defrauding so many people. It was just unbelievable. And to hear some of the stories, it was heartbreaking. But they were sitting there stone-faced, Stephen Mnuchin, John Thane, all the others. And then they had these churches and other people saying, oh, no, I think the sales should go through, and I think they're going to do great for our community. And it turns out they paid these people to do that. And it later turned out that one of the One West Bank's officers had written letters in support of the sale from borrowers that had never written those letters. He'd just taken their names off the bank's records and written letters and emails sending out support for the sale that was so false. Did anything happen to him? No, because he's an executive at a bank. So he can lie, cheat, steal, they all can. And nothing happens. So, the other interesting thing was I'd been introduced to the National Association of Asian Americans. It was like a charity kind of organization. It was a 501(c), and a person named Sandra Jolly had introduced me to this group saying they've really helped people. They have an inside track with One West Bank. And so I'd submitted, while all this was going on, I'd submitted an application to have them help me get a modification. And I'd signed all the documents, talked to them. And interestingly enough, Faith Bautista was the CEO of that organization. She had been on YouTube and all over bragging about how she'd made this bank take an offer that was less than someone else offered because she wanted to help her client, and she'd done this and she helped homeowners. She did all these things. Well, she was there promoting the sale of One West Bank because apparently they were paying her organization and promising all these things. And, I didn't know that at the time, but I went up to her and I thanked her for trying to help me. I said, I really appreciate this. And she said, oh, great. She said, did you sign all the forms for us? And I said, yes, I did. But I'll make sure, double check tomorrow to make sure you get them all. And we shook hands and I thanked her and said, I look forward to working with you to get this modification through. Because I had absolutely been told she had an inside track with Joseph Otting, one of the other officers of the bank.
Apparently.
So, yeah, so I felt fully confident. I mean, I didn't think that me speaking out, and I was just telling the truth. There was nothing untruthful about anything I said. And it was just, my personal experience as with others. Well, literally 7 days later, I got a letter from their council, NAAC's council, saying Miss Bautista is way too busy to help. And it seems that this other organization from up north, they're helping you, so you should go to them. Well, they weren't helping me. They just asked me to make my comment. They don't do all these modifications. That's not what their role was at all. And they were shocked. And so, instead of saying, well, Miss Bautista is too busy, but one of our other people will help you, it turns out that this other organization sent them a letter saying this seems to be retaliation for Ms. Colebrook speaking out at this Federal Reserve hearing. And that hearing was all a sham because they were planning to let the sale go through anyway. It was just a publicity stunt that they did it for. And I have the transcript of all that, and you'll be shocked to read it. But he said, well, we can't help you anymore. She has to find somewhere else. Well, you're a 501(c)(3) getting federal money to help people, and you discriminate against me because I'd spoken out against the bank. And Miss Bautista's actually pictured standing next to John Thane of Citibank and Stephen Mnuchin and Joseph Auden of One West Bank. She's sitting there smiling and pictured with them.
All honorable men.
And oh yes, well, it even gets better. I didn't find this out until much, 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 much later because I wasn't thinking of, I was just trying to, what can I do now? It turns out that Miss Bautista got a position on the advisory board of Citibank, who One West was sold to. Oh, and it even gets better than that. She got a position under Stephen Mnuchin when he was appointed the Treasury Secretary. Wow. You can't make this up, can you?
Truth is always stranger than fiction.
It really is. I mean, I'm laughing about it now, but it was just so hard and so egregious and so upsetting. And apparently, Miss Bautista was supposed to be helping other people at that hearing, and they cut them all off because anybody that spoke out against the sale, they just stopped helping them. And it turns out Miss Bautista, a couple of years ago only, I think there's a lawsuit against her. I don't know how it's turned out, if it's actually done, where even her own organization was saying that she was doing things wrong. But it doesn't help me, And later on, I was still getting emails from this organization saying, how can we help you? Do you need our help still? Well, wait a minute, it's a little too late. You're sending me emails. Even I get them from Miss Bautista's email saying, oh, we'd like you to come to this meeting. We'd like you to come to this dinner. Like, are you out of your minds? What are you doing here? So it's just one big mess, and I've been doing everything I could to try to, right the wrong. I got an attorney who was a very good at writing, but I will be honest, I told him to his face. I said, "You're just a pussy in front of the judge," And he said, "Well, you can't upset the judges." And I said, "Why not? Is it because you're dangling by your bar card?" Um, and I said, "The judges are there to, uphold the law and the truth. If you had to tell the judge they're doing wrong, because one instance in one of the lawsuits I had against the bank, the judge, it turns out, I wasn't at this particular hearing, but my attorney was. And he said, "Well, it seems," the judge is sitting there, rubbing his chin. "My daughter is babysitting for Mr. McGinnity's young son." "Really? Your daughter's babysitting Mr. McGinnity?" That's the attorney who is the biggest crook on the face of this earth, I think. And I will say it to his face. I have said it to his face, and he gets really upset that I call him a liar. He's like, he gets huffy and puffy, and "I'm an attorney of good standing." Well, LA is a city of what, 4 million, maybe 5 million people. Their attorney firm that he works for has 220 people, at least, who attorneys working for them, plus other staff. And you can't find anyone else to babysit your young son but the judge's daughter that you're litigating against in front of. What do you think of that? Now, you're a reasonable person of prudence. If somebody came and said that to you, would you believe that somebody could get a fair hearing? Would you believe or think that there's something fishy going on there? That doesn't seem right. Or would you say, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's just the babysitting his son. He probably couldn't find anyone else." What would
Es-
you think?
Especially considering all the things you've already uncovered at this point. I think that the needle's going to move to corruption.
Corruption, yes. Well, I did write a complaint to the state bar, and they said, "Oh, he's done nothing wrong. There's no impropriety there." I wrote to the Judicial Commission. "Oh, there's no impropriety there. You can't prove that he had coffee or met on the golf course and they discussed your case." I said, "Oh, really? Really? You think that they're going to tell me that they met on the golf course or over coffee and talked about my case? You think they're going to admit that to me? How am I going to prove that?" Just like, how can I prove to the court that I didn't get that mail that they sent me? You can't prove a negative. You just can't. But that's what they told me I had to do.
Or
Um,
send notes through his daughter to the baby, through the babysitter, or whatever they needed to do.
Whatever they needed to do.
I,
Well, it turns out also that that judge was at one point on on the Judicial Board of Commission. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to the Judicial Commission Board, filing a complaint against this judge who was, in charge of it at one point. It's like, wait a minute, Tina, you're just batting your head against a brick wall here, because no matter what you say and no matter what truth you bring out, they're just going to shoot you down and shut you down because you're just a peon here. You're just a deadbeat homeowner. You didn't want to pay. You wanted a free house. Well, it's banks that get free houses 5 times over.
it's a small
Um,
world after all.
it's a small world after all. You're right. So I'm still, still fighting even today. And I mean, this is the shortened version I'm giving you. Obviously, you know that because it's a huge scandal. And they, so I decided I would file against the the attorney, because at one point my attorney, who wrote well, we'd sent an appeal to the Supreme Court because they'd completely violated the homeowners Bill of Rights. None of the documents were accurate, and they had a chance to make them accurate right up until the days of foreclosure, but they didn't. And according to the homeowners Bill of Rights, I was entitled to 3 times the damages if they had inaccurate documents. The judge didn't care, Supreme Court didn't care. No, no big deal. No, 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 you can't have that. So, because technically, if that notice of trustee sale was wrong, they should have rescinded it and reissued a correct one. And and as you saw from some of the documents I sent you, the amounts they kept saying was due and owing, it went up and down like a yo-yo on steroids. And so I kept asking for a certified accounting, and they said, no, we don't have to give you one. And they'd added legal fees onto
Were,
my
were you
20.
in discovery at this point?
No, I never was able to get to discovery. They would never let me get to discovery. They
Gotcha.
just kept denying everything. So everything I've discovered has been outside of discovery. So it's taken me a long time. And at one point they added these legal fees of 26,000 for that first lawsuit, but they never actually applied to the court to add those legal fees. And if you're asking for legal fees for a court case, you have to apply to the court, give reasons, and the court has to approve or deny it. But the
Signed by
party
a
who's
judge.
they're asked, yes, yeah, but they never asked. They just added, and I said, well, they said we can. It's we're collecting on a debt, and it says in the court, the contract that we can collect reasonable attorney's fees for debt collection. I said, you told me you're not a debt collector. So how can you be saying it's debt collection? It's not. You're answering a lawsuit, not collecting on a debt. Well, then it turns out there was another amount added to my lawsuit, and it was 20,000. Not added to my loan balance, $20,000, and I could never get them to give me an accounting of what that was. They said you just have to pay what we say you owe. Well, it turns out through this whistleblower lawsuit where I eventually got a hold of my loan file because I gave a 4-hour deposition, and I asked this attorney who did the deposition if she could get a copy of it, and she did, which was surprising. She didn't think they would give it to her, but they did. And in there, there's some interesting stuff. The 20,000 that they added was for a small claims case I filed against Mr. Mnuchin himself back in 2013. And they sent attorneys to that small claims case, which I didn't know at the time. Attorneys can't go to small claims for their client. The person who is sued in small claims has to turn up themselves. An attorney can help you with an appeal, but they can't turn up at the small claims. But they did. Well, it turns out O'Melveny and Myers submitted bills as well as this, other law firm, and which is, it's a long name. And anyway, they submitted total bills of almost 20,000. It was 19,000 and change for legal advice for a small claims case.
Isn't the
And
limit on small claims about $5,000, or is it more in California?
well, it's 10,000 in California.
Okay.
That's what you can sue for.
Right.
Okay. Now, for legal fees related to small claims, you can only get $250 unless it goes to an appeal and the appeal's considered frivolous. Then they can request from the court up to $1,000. But you have to request it from the court. But they just added 19,000 and change, almost 20,000 to my loan balance with no court supervision, no court order, nothing. And I would never have found that out unless I saw all those bills in my loan file. And it was there that I also saw that right before they filed for that in rem, there's notes in there that says, these, we have to hurry this up. These grant deeds are, fraud. They're invalid, and yet 4 months after them putting their notice in my loan file saying, we know these documents are fraud, we know they're not valid, they submitted them into court, which is a felony under California Penal Code, to submit a knowingly forged false document into court. But nothing happens to them.
Yeah,
So
this is happening over in Alphonse's case. The lawyers are putting in fraudulent, forged liens and documents and things of this nature, and that's where he's at as well. So, please tell us what happens.
Well, you can't file cases against the attorneys. You can file all these attorney complaints to the state bar, but as you heard probably in the news, our state bar of California is as corrupt as they come, because they allowed that Girardi case to have 150 complaints against him, and he was bribing them to look the other way. So what's the point of the state bar if they don't uphold the law and they don't uphold the rules? It's the fox guarding the hen house. it just is ridiculous. You shouldn't be having attorneys ruling on attorneys' claims because they're all going to protect their own, just like the judges. I pointed out to a judge recently that, this attorney violated the law. Now you've been notified that this attorney has violated the law. Here's what he's done. And I require you to submit this to a higher court for criminal investigation. Nope, he dismissed me. And he was upset that I called him out and, threatened to sanction me. Well, what are you going to get? I don't have anything, so what are you going to get? Because this attorney who had said, we're going to send you the original note, which we had requested, and we'll send it after the lawsuit is ended. That was in 2017. Well, the lawsuit ended with, of course, the judge ruling against me because, his daughter's babysitting for the attorney. And so we filed an appeal, and the attorney sent another letter to my then attorney. Well, we're not going to send you this original note and allonges until the appeal's over because, we were going to send it, and we will send it when the appeal is over. So the appeal came over, they didn't send it. And, my attorney at the time said, well, you can trust that they will do that. So we didn't pursue that in the court case at the time because he said, you can trust these attorneys. He's an attorney. He will stick to his word. Oh, really? Don't ever believe that when they say that because it's not true. So I never got it. So I sent a written request to the CEO of Citibank for that note and allonges stating the letters that they'd said, saying, never got it. So I filed against that, and the judge ruled saying, well, you're not entitled to it under that statute because one part of the statute says, once the loan is satisfied, which they'd already sent me a letter saying the loan was satisfied, and it was satisfied at the foreclosure sale through my equity. They, because if I hadn't put all that work in and put the sweat equity in, they wouldn't have been able to get the amount I owed. They got actually more than what they owed because they took all that extra money. And so I filed a lawsuit against the attorney himself for fraud. And all the elements, I fit every element, spelled it out. And his
counsel, did you file that pro se, or you had another
pro
attorney
se,
file?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I've been pro se for the last few years because I don't have the money for an attorney. Yeah. If you're living on $810 Social Security a month, how are you going to afford an attorney?
Yeah, I was going to wonder if you could have paid off your mortgage with all your attorney's fees to date.
Yeah, well, I don't have very much in attorney's fees, trust me, because most of it I've done pro se. But I'll tell you what, they've spent a lot of money fighting me, and it's probably cost them, because they did try to add attorney's fees to a couple of those lawsuits, but it wasn't approved. I think, adding up what they claim they've probably spent over $400,000 fighting me. And if they just accepted that offer on the property, they wouldn't have had to go through this. But then it begs the question, who's paying for those attorney's fees? Are they recouping them from the Treasury? Because it doesn't make any financial sense to fight someone and spend so much money fighting them when you could just settle. No, they don't want to do that.
Unless it's to protect fraud for the future.
There you go. Well, isn't that the reason? It would have cost them maybe $10 in certified mail to send me the original note in allonges, which they promised to do. And I know those allonges are fraud because they're signed by two deposed robo-signers who have been admitted in court that they didn't sign any of the documents that their signatures are attached to. And they didn't have some of them didn't have signing authority. Now, the reason I believe they don't want me to get that original note is either they don't have it, although they said that they'd found it in storage and they had it and they were going to send it to me. Then in the loan file, it says that Deutsche Bank has custody of my note. What's Deutsche Bank got to do with One West or Citibank? Why do they have it? And so I believe the reason they are fighting so hard for me not to get it is either they've destroyed it, or on the back of that note, it tells the real story of who the owner of that note is. That would make sense for them to fight so hard to cover up the fraud, wouldn't it? Well, when I filed this suit against the attorney, his counsel sent me a letter saying, they've got to meet with Ver, and I need to drop the lawsuit because they're going to do this, this, and this if I don't. And they said, and I quote, "You knew that we had no intention of doing what we said we were going to do." Really? Um, I didn't know I had a crystal ball or psychic powers. How would I know that you had no intention of doing what you said you were going to do? You put it in writing, you signed it. And you said you were going to do this, and then you decided not to. I know the statute of limitations is over. Well, no, it actually isn't, because the statute of limitations doesn't run until I discover that you are not going to do something that you promised to do. And that would run after I sent the letter to the CEO of your bank asking for what you promised to send, and it didn't come. Because in that letter, you said you were absolutely not going to send me anything until the lawsuits were over and final, and that didn't happen until the appeal was denied. So that debunks that idea. And then later, during this lawsuit and the back and forth, they filed an anti-SLAPP. They said they had litigation privilege. And they also, in one of their documents filed into the appeal court, well, you knew the extent of the fraud. Really? Well, yeah, I suspected the extent of the fraud, but how could I know? And you're just admitting that you defrauded me. You
Right.
just said you knew the extent of the fraud. That's an admission of guilt, as is you knew we had no intention of sending you what we should. Well, the judge, no, they have litigation privilege to lie.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah. Oh,
Where's
yeah.
that? Where's
Yeah.
that in the statute?
Well, there is a statute in California, and actually most states do have the thing called litigation privilege, which means if you make a mistake, you have litigation privilege to correct it. These things. Well, California actually has what they call an absolute litigation privilege, which, I'm going to have to attack this at one day when I get some time, which is in short supply. It really is. It's very unclear, and I believe that it's being abused and misapplied everywhere, because it's really for witnesses. When you really, really read that statute, it's to prevent witnesses from feeling intimidated if they are called into court, so that if they've lied or whatever, they have a litigation privilege. But it specifically says it applies to witnesses. Well, Mr. McGinnity is not a witness. He's an attorney who has lied in writing and deliberately. And he also interfered with a case of me going after a notary that, did some wrong stuff in Texas. He's not allowed to do that. He crossed state lines, but that doesn't matter either, because he's an attorney and they can do whatever they want, it seems. So I'm putting in court that litigation privilege doesn't apply. They said everything's barred by res judicata, which, is saying that if you've litigated once and you lost, you can't litigate again. Well, I do, and the judge just kept saying you can't get past litigation privilege. You can't get past the statute of limitations, and you can't get past res judicata. Well, there's a Supreme Court case that has never been overturned that says that if conditions worsen or if there are new facts, then the res judicata does not apply. Well, that happens in my case. Conditions worsened, new facts came to light that I could not have discovered before. So the judge made me write a piece about why I didn't think litigation privilege applied. So wrote all that out with help. And so they never came back with that on this latest appeal. They never, applied that. We proved that the statute of limitations didn't apply because here's his letter that says we're not going to do anything until this date. So the statute of limitations doesn't start till this date. And so he just left it saying they have litigation privilege. You can't get past litigation privilege. Well, really, the state bar has rules of professional conduct, which I've found out recently by the governing body of the state bar. They are required to adhere to. Required. All attorneys in California are required to adhere to the State Bar Act and the Business and Professional Rules of Conduct. Well, some of those say that you cannot mislead any party or the courts. You cannot lie to them. Their own oath of office that they take says they will uphold the law of the land and the Constitution, and they will not misrepresent or mislead or lie. But they're doing that all the time, and now you're saying they have litigation privilege. What's the point in having these rules and the State Bar Act, which specifically forbids them to do this, if you then say, well, they have litigation privilege to lie? So I believe that that litigation privilege that the California Supreme Court put in is being misapplied and abused because the attorney is not a witness. He is the actual defendant. So that's where I'm at right now, trying to get into the U.S. Supreme Court because the judge said again, he threatened to sanction me if I keep litigating. Well, it is my right, and you can't sanction the right to go to the courts for redress of grievance. But these are judges, and he's a biased judge. He actually ruled, I found a ruling he did years ago where he ruled against an attorney because the attorney tried to deceive another attorney. And it's almost the exact same circumstances in my case, but he ruled for the attorneys in my case because he doesn't like my being pro se. He doesn't like me calling him out. I actually had 8 affidavits, sworn affidavits, that we submitted into the court of people who had been following my case, people of, credible witnesses who believed that I was not going to get a fair hearing. And when you submit those, he is required to disqualify himself. But no, he rules again. I'm not disqualifying myself. I'm denying that. He denied me forcing the attorneys to submit the correct documents into court. No, you're not having that either. You're not having, and he would wait and wait and wait and rule, and then he would rule at the last minute and dismiss everything I had. And just, so I did call him out in his papers. I said he's unfit to serve. And he said, I was just, angry about that because, he said I gave him a tirade of invectiveness. Well, I'm not afraid of you. You're not God. You're supposed to rule on the law, not your personal feelings of being biased against a pro se litigant because you think they should hire one of your bar card members who then just puff their chest out at each other and come to an agreement of who's going to win this one and who's going to win that one,
Right. Maybe if you had a bar card, it would have been different.
No, maybe, but then I'd become one of the lying lawyers, wouldn't I?
That's right.
And that would go that would go against my principles and my ethics.
Right.
So all I've done is submit the truth, and all they've done is submit lies, false records, false documents, false this, false that, and they get away with it. And our justice system is not a justice; it's an injustice system. And if you are not one of the favored few, you're not going to win. As somebody else has said, I think it was an attorney said it, if you're going to go against somebody, just hire the biggest, baddest law firm you can, because at least you might have a chance. But if you can't afford it, like most people, there's many studies out there that say people don't even have $400 for an emergency set aside. How are you expected to pay between $250 and $650 an hour for an attorney to represent you when you can't even live on it? You don't even have that much to live on. And so that I understand why people give up. I understand why people just say the system is stacked against them. You can't fight City Hall. But sometimes you just have to take a stand and you have to fight. And yes, I've wanted to give up quite a few times because I think, why am I fighting when I'm not going to win? But I believe I'm setting a record. And eventually, just like the Me Too movement, the what's that, Jeff Weiner, the Harvey Weinstein, the Jeffrey Epstein, all those, it eventually comes to the surface. Eventually. Now, it may be too late for me, but hopefully it won't be too late for others. And that lawsuit I was telling you about with the whistleblower, it was settled. And you know what happens when the banks pay fines and settlements and everything. That money goes to the Treasury. Well, here's the ironic thing. When Mr. Mnuchin was Treasury Secretary, uh, that was when the banks that he was in charge of, he did all that. He was in charge of the bank that did all those false accountings, false, statements and requests for money to the Treasury. So he defrauded the U.S., then he was put in charge of the Treasury. And all the fines that they paid went to the Treasury to then go to bail the banks out yet again. You can't make that stuff up either.
Well, they bailed the banks out with that and your money.
Yes, correct. That and my money. And how is it, and I had filed a criminal suit against Mnuchin in Texas. And surprisingly enough, I got a call saying that we're going to submit this to, the, what is it called? I'm drawing a blank at the moment. Anyway, they were going to submit it. They were going to follow this lead, and they believed that there was grounds there.
So why Texas? And was it a prosecuting attorney or something, a prosecutor that made the criminal?
No, I did the criminal suit against him. The allegation, and I did it in Texas because a lot of the stuff happened in Texas. And One West Bank not only had a headquarters in Pasadena, they had one in Texas, and a lot of the stuff, the documents were coming out of Texas for a California home. And so I wanted it to go before the grand jury. And it was going to get for a year that, yes, we're going to do this, we're going to. Then all of a sudden, it got dropped. And the person who said, he had said, yeah, this guy is a bad guy. We're going to see this through. And I submitted all the documents they asked for, hundreds of things of proof. And he said, well, I just want to put this together. I want to make it right, because when I go to the grand jury, I only have like 30 minutes to present the case and give them all the evidence. And then they decide whether to indict or not to indict and everything. And, we were going through this, and then all of a sudden he's gone. He's been assigned to somewhere else. And when I called to find out, we don't have any recollection of this. We have no records of this case. And I said, what do you mean you have no records? I have these emails here from this, and this. Well, we don't have any records. Well, I'll put you through to this person. And this person said she was going to follow through with it. Yes, we're good. And then all of a sudden, that person is no longer there. I wonder how many people he paid off there to not follow this through to the grand jury.
Probably
he's a very rich man.
Probably just one. But
oh yeah.
and then that guy bribed 10 others to make sure it happened.
That's true.
Right.
Oh, and another thing, remember the PPP loans during the pandemic?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, do you recall what they were supposed to be for and what help they were supposed to give?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they were supposed to help the small business owners. They were supposed to help the people whose business has been shut down, small restaurants, hairdressers, nail salons, all these people that were literally put out of work. These PPP loans were supposed to help them. Well, attorneys during that time, they were still working because they can work from home. They don't have to go into the office. Everything's done by computer and Zoom calls and everything like that. Well, guess what? The bank that I'm against, they got a PPP loan for $6.9 million. Okay? Now, people could apply to have that PPP loan forgiven, but they actually applied to get that PPP loan forgiven, $6.9 million. And they said it was to retain staff. Well, you're not going to lose staff because people are still working, attorneys are still working. And they got it forgiven in a year that it's on record that they brought in $193 million in revenue. but they got that $6.9 million forgiven because they're attorneys and they know what to do with the legal system and how to, snake by and how to be sleazy. And they're not the only attorney firm. Now, some attorney firms paid it back, but not this one.
The thing about these PPP loans is it rewarded the people that got to keep their employees. If
Yes.
if you were a small business and had to shut down, then you didn't get any money because you weren't employing anyone, and so it rewarded the people that had the money and backing to stay in business. So it didn't help anybody stay in business. It only helped people get rich.
That's right. And, I think there's something out there about Barbara Streisand getting a PPP loan to pay her gardeners and such like. There's all this fraud happened. And they catch the little people, they catch the non-lawyers who used the PP loans to say, oh, they bought a yacht or a home or a car. But what about these attorneys' firms? $6.9 million loan. You get totally and completely forgiven, and yet you brought in revenue of 193 million. Don't you think that's fraud on the taxpayers?
I don't think. I know.
you know. And yet I did submit, something to the SEC about that, but of course nothing happens to them because they're all in bed together. The SEC, the IRS, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, all our government officials, they're all being paid by lobbyists. And I think it was in 2016, I haven't forgotten seeing this, it was a 60-minute expose that did, they had somebody from another country come and go to all these attorney firms. I believe it was in Chicago that they went, they were trying to do something fraudulent about money and money laundering. And one attorney firm said, "Oh, that's illegal. I'm not having anything to do with that." Another said, "Well, I'm not sure that." And then this one attorney, it was a hidden camera thing, said, "Well, we won't go to jail. We belong to a special class of citizens. We make the laws and the rules, and we make them to suit ourselves." And he's on camera saying this.
Rules for thee, not for you.
Me.
How's it work?
Yeah,
not for me. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So, so this is, this is just only a little tiny part of that story, and the fact that they're allowed to get away with so much. I even tried to overturn in the bankruptcy court, when they put those fraudulent documents in, and I had the help of an attorney, went to the bankruptcy appellate court, and they said, "No, we're not allowing you to file anything else. You can't file anything to overturn this, nothing. We believe the lower courts did right, even though you've proved that it's wrong." And that these, they said, "Well, you must have submitted these documents." I don't even know how to go to the, the county recorder's office and lift a stamp and find another case where I don't have the technical knowledge to even do a minute piece of that. And so they just say, "Well, you must be to blame. It must be you. The attorneys couldn't possibly do this." Now, it's funny that the attorneys, that the two people that they said I had transferred my property to, both had loans with banks that were serviced by this company that was submitting these false documents into court. Really? Circumstantial evidence. Wouldn't that tell you that there's some fishy stuff going on there? How would I, as a layperson who is I'm a little bit more technical than I was, obviously, I've had to learn. How would I possibly know to find these two people in a city of millions who had loans with this very same bank that was coming against me? How would I even possibly have the ability to pick those two out? I wouldn't. So
not without
here
discovery.
I am, not without discovery. And of course, they don't let you have discovery. But now I've got this. I'm definitely going to try to do some criminal complaints. But again, we're going up against DAs who were attorneys, are attorneys, who don't want to go against other attorneys, and they say, well, this been a long time. You should have found this out before. How could I find out if they won't give me in my loan file? And they're hiding everything from you. There should be no statute of limitations on fraud. There should be none.
Well,
And there is.
there really isn't. But if
Well, they tell you, the FBI specifically on a phone call told me that there's only no statute of limitations on murder. And there is a statute of limitations in California on basic stuff. There, if you don't find it out and it's fraud, it's no big deal. They're not going to go after it because it's too much trouble, too
well,
much work.
in Louisiana, you have a statute of limitations for 3 years fraud, which is the only one that's really above a year. Almost everything's a year. But
Yeah.
From the time that you find out the fraud, you have 3 years to file. Is what supposedly has supposed to happen. Of course, they're going to bring that heavy burden of proving fraud up to monumental.
Oh, yes.
So it's going to be very difficult. But yeah,
Well,
I
in
hear
my
you.
case, they've admitted to the fraud. They
Right.
admitted in writing. You knew the extent of the fraud. You knew we had no intention of doing what we said we were going to do. They admit to the fraud, and the judges say, no big deal. They got litigation privilege to lie. I mean, it just doesn't, it's incomprehensible. And when I talk to lay people who haven't been through this torture, they say, that's not right. No, you must be wrong. No, you can't do that. That just doesn't seem right. You just can't be telling the truth. And I said, go look it up. Go look at it. Would you like to see my court papers? And they're just so incredulous that this can be happening in our society. And they, like me, I had the false belief when I came to this country, legally, the hard way, the expensive way. And I took my citizenship and I swore an oath to protect the Constitution. And I was in the Royal Air Force for 8 years back in England. So, I had an oath there. I just believed that I was coming to a fair and just country. Obviously, I made mistakes along the way. My first mistake was trusting the banks, but I'd been brought up to trust. I was absolutely brought up to trust authority, trust police, trust banks, handshake, everything. You could trust them. Well, then I thought, well, I could also trust the government to help where they were supposed to. And I thought I could trust the justice system. Well, I found out you can't trust any of them. And that's, you come to this country and you think this is not a third world country. Well, it seems like it is when it comes to justice, true justice.
Only the facade is first world. Only the facade.
Yes,
And
that's true. That's true.
Did you ever determine that did they want your property for some type of development, or was there some reason, or in retrospect, what
equity?
They just wanted it for equity, just equity.
They wanted the money. They wanted the money. And what I also found out is because I had started Fraudulent, and when we first started this, a group of us, that were against IndyMac and One West, which turned out to be the same company, we wrote letters about the fraud to Obama, Eric Holder, all, there were so many of our Congress members that we wrote to and told them what was happening and begged for their help. We even sent it to ABC News, NBC, all the, newspapers, the big people. Not one response. Not one response. Well, One West got a hold of, what I'd written and some others. And, as my one decent attorney said, they hate you, Teena. They absolutely hate you, and they will do anything to stop you. And it's a personal vendetta because they know they've got the money and the time and the attorneys, and they don't care, and they think they can wear me down. And it doesn't matter what I do, what truth I uphold, they will do anything to beat me.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yep. And
so what would
it's horrific.
What would you do differently this time that you didn't do last time? And would you go to other banks and see what they said, or you think that'd have been the same across the board?
I think at that time that it was all happening, it would have been the same across the board, because they all go for, you know, because of course your credit score's been damaged because of all this. Uh, and funnily enough, the foreclosure never went on my credit score. Somehow, everything, when that sale was going from One West to Citibank, everything got scrubbed from my credit report. I didn't do it. Why that my loan was not on there? It used to be, but it was not anymore. Got totally scrubbed. They never put the foreclosure on my credit report. Nothing.
You think that'd
That's
have
a
been
little
a further?
strange, isn't it?
You think that'd have been a further crime if they'd have done it? And that's why they chose not to, or
I don't know. I think they were trying to clean things up when they were trying to do the sale. They were definitely trying to clean things up. And maybe after that, they just thought, well, she's already fighting us. Maybe we could have, get into trouble for it. I don't know. But they don't get into trouble for all the false signatures, the robo signing, the fraud. They don't get into trouble for anything. But, I think we just, when we're in this at the start, we don't have enough knowledge. I think people absolutely do not have the legal knowledge that they need, um, to have to understand what's going on. And I understand people are working, they've got families, they've got obligations, they're trying to do their best, and takes so much time. But if I'd had the legal knowledge that I have now, then I would have done things a lot differently, a lot differently. And I probably, when I realized that they'd put that, amount on, I would have gone and found some money somewhere to get the biggest, baddest attorney to go against them and force them to accept that $365,743.43. I would have found a way to do that if I'd known, but have I just didn't have the knowledge. I didn't, I was running scared. I was trying to do whatever I could, uh, and trying to learn. And, yes, I get bad advice. Obviously, I got bad advice along the line. And, you do what you can. You think you don't realize it's bad advice sometimes. You're just trying your best to do everything you can to save your home. So,
and
and I
sometimes
think
getting bad advice from a professional you paid is grounds for re-adjudicating a case. So just
it is, if time hasn't gone by
right.
too much. I tried to file a case against the attorney that, said, oh, she never lost, and this, that, and the other. And that, they said, oh, no, she fought it. They said, this didn't happen. I'm just plugging my phone in because it's running out of charge here. So I just, I don't know, would I fight again? I probably, after they first told me that, if I'd known how badly they would lie and deceive, I probably just should have figured out holding on, any way to hold on, even though the monthly payment was going up and down like a yo-yo. I should have just said, not trusted anyone. I shouldn't have trusted one person. I should have just said, okay, let me figure this out. Let me see if I can find a way to do this. But I really did think you could trust the bank and the justice system and the government. They'd set up this hemp program. The banks caused this scandal. They caused this mess.
Tell me about
And
the hemp scandal. Can you elaborate?
well, the hemp. Well, it's been a long time since I was researching some of that, but they'd put in these hemp programs to help people, and it was supposed to be, to make these loan modifications and to give them what they called a hemp modification. But that turned out to be a scam, and they turned out to only give it to certain people that, attorneys and people who, because attorneys were losing their homes sometimes. So it turned out that they were only doing that. And then all these state programs where the state would pay the banks some of the money to keep us in the property. One West Bank wouldn't even take that money from us, the state. They said, no, we're not working with you. In fact, it's documented that One West Bank was the absolute worst to deal with modifications, with taking the state money. And I know quite a few people because we all got together over the internet to do this. The whole thing was just a mess and a fraud, and it's another cover up to try to help the banks, because they all said they're too big to fail. Well, you know, I have a saying, it's like Wall Street got bailed out and Main Street got kicked out. And it's all about the lobbyists and our government, that nobody should be too big to fail. Look at, what was it? Enron failed. They weren't too big to fail. What was that one bank that failed? A huge, huge bank. The country didn't go to pieces. The small banks, I would always now deal with small banks. And the interesting thing is, at one point, I had a business property, a small mobile home park in another state. And at one point, I had a mortgage, and there was a huge storm that shut everything down. The residents couldn't pay their rent. They couldn't get to work. Nobody could get anywhere. And of course, if they couldn't pay the rent, I couldn't pay the mortgage. So I picked up the phone and I called the bank and I said, "Hey, can I speak to the president, Tim?" And they said, "Sure, Teena. Yeah. He's out right now. We'll get him to call you back." And sure enough, he called me back and he said, "What can I do to help you, Teena?" Excuse me, sorry. And I said, "Well, this, thank you. The storm, we've got some issues with the tenants. They can't get to work. They can't get their paychecks. They can't pay. I need a little help." He said, "Well, what do you need?" I said, "Well, could you give me a few months to catch up and do it?" He said, how about 3 months? He said, "Now we have to charge you interest, of course." He said, "But he said, will that help?" And I said, "Sure." So he said, I'll work up, send me $75. And he said, "I'll get you the papers, sign those, and we'll get it done, and we'll just put it on the back of the loan." So he didn't ask me, I didn't have to submit my, life's work, my bank statements, tax returns. I didn't have to submit one piece of paper except sign this document. That's similar. And then, I'd eventually sold it, on a wraparound contract to this older couple, and the bank knew I'd sold it on this wraparound. We went to them, we explained, because they couldn't give them a mortgage because they were too old. And at one point they fell into a little difficulty because of some, issues again in the state. So we both called the bank up and said, Tim, can you help us out? We need this rate reduced. And he said, "What do you need it to go to?" And I said, "Well, could you make the payments like, $1,000 less a month and just add it onto the back end?" And he said, "Sure, no problem. Send me $75. I'll get the paperwork drawn up." And I just sort of said, Tim, how can you do this when the big banks make us jump through every hoop, make us put all this paperwork in, and then 30 days later it's out of date, so you have to submit it again, and then 30 days later it's out of date, so you have to submit it all again. He said, "Well," I said, when we enter into a mortgage contract with you," he said, "we're in business with you." He said, "We want you to succeed. We don't want the property. We just want the interest. That's all we want. That's what we're in business for." And I said, "Well, why can't the big banks do that?" He says, "Because they don't live in their communities. We live where we work." And he said, "We know our customers. We want them to succeed. These guys, they don't care. They live in these big mansions. They don't know who you are. You're just a number to them. To us, you are our customer." And he knew my name. It was not, "No, you can't talk to him, talk to one of the minions." If I said, "I want to speak to the president of the bank," he called me back when he had a moment, if he wasn't available right then. And they would say, "Teena, we'll get him to call you back, no problem." So it can work, but it's about greed. How many mansions do you need? Stephen Mnuchin had at least 5 mansions. Now, when he was trying to foreclose on a lot of people in California, there was one a lady called Rose Goodell, I think it is. She's a black lady in one of the, poor areas. And he was trying to foreclose on her 1,000-square-foot home. And so she had this group, they were protesting outside his $44 million, 22,000-square-foot mansion. That was just one of his mansions. And So, and he was just horrified. And when he was getting a divorce from that then wife, I saw something in his divorce papers online that he requested that the address be kept secret. And he said, I spend thousands scrubbing my address from the internet because when this, person, protested outside my home with a group of about 100 people. He said, it was so traumatic to my children. He said, my children, if they'd seen that more, they would have suffered psychological harm. And I thought, you narcissistic son of a bitch. You know, you only care about your own children. You don't care about the children that are living under bridges, in cars, in their grandparents' garages. You only care about your own spoiled children. Why don't you just go wrap them in cotton wool? Don't let them go into the real world because they're going to face these kind of things. And 100 people protesting outside of your house was going to cause your children psychological harm. How dare you be so out of touch with reality and so narcissistic that you would make that statement?
Well, they
But
know
they
that
don't care.
the national security risk is the only way to get anything done. With when they ask outrageous things, so they do that. And let me just ask you: so, do you still have that house, or you lost it?
No, it's gone. I lost it. It's been sold 3 times since.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been trying to get at least, if that not the house back compensation, which according to all the rules and the laws and the homeowners bill of rights, I should be entitled to that because they never gave accurate documents or accounting. Our court systems are a hot mess,
Yeah.
especially in California.
And do you think this was a national top-down um, incentive for these banks to foreclose to get land in California?
Oh, I absolutely think so. It had to be. How else could it? What could it not be? I mean,
Well, I didn't know if
you,
the
you know, you,
owners of the bank might have been, corrupt and trying to finagle some other stuff, or, but if you
well,
think
they're all
it,
corrupt, and they're, I mean, they're trying to make as much money as they can for themselves. Because let's tell you, 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 100 million a year is not enough for them. They've got to have. They've got such inflated egos and sense of self worth that they think that we're just the peons, the minions. They want. I personally believe that they just want a two-tier society, the so-called elites, as they call themselves, and the rest of us as poor. Because when you control the housing and you control the medicine and you control the food, you control the people. Well, they're pretty much there. You know, they and all these places like BlackRock, they've been buying up hundreds and thousands of properties, and then they, fix them up. They buy whole streets of foreclosed homes sometimes, and then they jack the rents up. So they're making millions. They've got offshore accounts every which way but Sunday, and people are struggling to make rent. They're struggling to live, and they're struggling to pay food. But then the government says, well, okay, we'll give you some handouts. We'll give you a few crumbs here, but then you can vote for us to put us back in office because we're giving you these crumbs.
yeah, I think they gave
They don't.
the residents of Maui $700. I think that'll buy a few meals maybe in Hawaii. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
it makes no sense if there's not a deeper agenda. And we I'm trying to be respectful of your time. You said you had about 2 hours, and we're approaching that. But if you have a lot more, let's go. If not, we can
Well,
reschedule. Or
I think, let me see what you think to this. And once you've read a few more things, what I'd like to do is send you, if I can find it, because I'm on vacation right now, is this whole last part where I'm going against this attorney. And I think maybe do a special piece just on that because it's a lot for people to take in. It's a lot. They'll say, well, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. Yes, did I do things wrong? Yes, I did. In hindsight, I did. But 2020 is always hindsight. I mean, you're going against these big corporations, these big banks, and you just don't have the knowledge. And if I could help anybody with my story, uh, I will. If it if it helps get some of our leaders, riled up, which I don't believe it. I don't believe they care, because when they were trying to confirm Mnuchin into that position as Treasury Secretary, I sent all kinds of stuff that how he was not qualified, because there's a list of things that they're supposed to do as Treasury Secretary. And he clearly isn't qualified for any of it, because he's in charge of the banks. He was in charge of, the CFPB, and he put his cronies in charge, the people in his own bank that he, did all this fraud with. He put them in those positions. So again, he's putting the fox in charge of the hen house. And until we stop that, uh, we're not going to get anywhere. It's going
And
to be the same thing year
e-
after year.
even in a third world country, after a 20-year fight, you seem like you would get some remedy, right? Some.
Some you think,
Well,
but no remedy yet.
that's an amazing journey. I can tell you that is quite frustrating, and it's a heartbreaking story that happens to way too many of us. And how many did it happen
Ugh,
to that you didn't even they didn't even cost them $500,000 in attorney's fees, and so
yeah.
bless you for that.
And how many people have committed suicide over this?
Right.
I know personally one person who attempted suicide. I spent hours talking to him, trying to talk him out of it. I eventually called the suicide hotline for him and said, look, get someone out here. You got to get someone out here to help this man. I'm not qualified. I did the best I could, but I wasn't qualified to help enough. And the hours I've spent on the phone talking to people, to grown men crying
Yeah.
because they were trying to get something done, and they were so frustrated, that they'd lost everything. And it's heartbreaking to see that when they take SWAT teams out to people's homes. Why do you need a SWAT team to take a grandmother out of a home? Why?
Intimidation.
Yeah, it's so our law enforcement is in on the crime. And it's an absolute crime to do this to anybody. We should be better than that. We
Yeah.
are not a third world country. People should be able to have a home, and they should be, when you run into trouble that the banks and the government cause the problem, they should be the one to say, look, we'll help you. If they just said, when this mess started in 2008, yeah, we're sorry, we made some mistakes, we caused this, we're just going to reduce everyone's loan to 3%, and we're going to put it out to 30, 40 years, and we'll add maybe add 5 or 10,000 or something on the back end of the loan to make up for what you've lost. We wouldn't have had this mess of foreclosures, and the homeless situation is atrocious in California and many states. And a lot of it is because of the high cost of living and the banks and the government not helping. They throw billions of dollars at the homeless situation and nothing changes.
Yeah.
Where does that money go?
It really brings things into perspective with the homeless across the especially in California right now. That this has been a plan they've been working on for a very, very long time to put people in tents on the street for whatever purpose that they think is going to accomplish, other than losing faith in our institutions. But
I've totally lost faith in our government. I've lost faith in our court system for sure. And a lot of the times I think when they're, and again, this is my own personal opinion, when they're sort of, trying to bring all these people in, and they, have all the people who are homeless, and then they give them free phones and free food or this and that. It's like buying votes. If you give someone the drug of choice, whether it be money, cigarettes, drugs, whatever it is, you give them that drug of choice, then you're saying, okay, I'll give you this if you vote for me and keep me in power.
yeah, it's an
And that,
enabler,
yes.
an
And,
enabler.
they try to dumb us down. They want us watching stuff like the Kardashians in reality TV shows and thinking that that's how we should live. You know, it's the dumbing down of America.
Yeah. Last question. When did you or how did you start studying law? What path did you take to become your own pro se?
Um, I started reading, and then I was put onto one of the biggest things I was put onto was Rule of Law Radio. Somebody said, you should go on this show and listen to this uh, show, and that they will help. And I had no idea, and I started listening to them, and it was, asked a few questions, was really nervous, and uh, started calling in every week and listening in, asking questions, and got more confidence, listened to what others were going through, and learned some things. And then I actually read our state constitution, which when I went to university here, which is how I came to this country on a track scholarship. I was never told there was a California Constitution in all my years in college. Never even knew it. Wasn't till I'd learned this and you learn that these people work for you, not the other way around. We don't work for them; they work for us, and you can hold them in check, but they don't want you to know that. So reading the law and reading the business and professional rules of conduct and this, Rule of Law Radio, I think really helped give me the confidence to go into court and be pro se. Because I remember the very first time that I went in, I was shaking. I mean, my hands were shaking, my legs were shaking. I was holding onto the lectern trying to speak so they wouldn't see me shaking so badly, And I thought, I'd call them Your Honor, and yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor. Now I don't even call them Your Honor because I don't find them in honor. I just call them Judge. If they want me to call them Your Honor, then they can
Earn it.
whistle because until I find them in honor, I'm not going to call them Your Honor.
Yes, yes. Respect is earned, not given.
Yes.
But
I respect the institution itself. I will give that some respect. But the judges who are up there, sitting there, acting like they're God and treating us with disrespect and condescension, no, I'm not going to give them any respect. They don't earn it. They don't deserve it.
that's right.
But that's what being on that radio show and then learning from others, talking to others who helped, that event that will gave me the confidence to be the fighter I am today, um, in fighting for justice and helping people. I still help people write letters, especially senior citizens who really don't have it in them. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the know-how and the technical knowledge to find out who to write to. And it's not like I'm giving them legal advice at all, which I'm not. I'm just saying, okay, you've been scammed. You've had this happen. Let's write to, the CFPB. Let's write to the FTC. Let me write a letter for you, and you can send it. I'm just going to put the right words in and get you the right address, and then you send it off. And I've helped quite a few seniors from being scammed by credit card companies and other businesses. And I believe that um, maybe that's some of my purpose in retirement is to help others avoid what I've been through and to help them recover from whatever it is they've been through financially, to just give them a heads up on how to make make the FTC, make the organizations that are supposed to be there to help them, make them do that. Make the FBI work. They're supposed to be working for us, not the banks and the rich and the famous. They're supposed to be helping the people. So if I can help just one or two or three people, then my life has been worth living.
That's exactly right. And you like you said earlier that well, first of all, I want to say Randy Kelton's a beast, and he's
Yes.
clearly advanced our cause a lot from just his Rule of Law
Yes.
Radio. I mean, look at you in California doing 20 years of fighting and giving you the ammunition and the tools you need to do it. But as you said, if I lost my train of thought. But yeah, if you can help just one person, spread that love a little bit further, make the record that you're talking about, and sooner or later, those records will be evidence moving forward to correct the system that we're in. At least, hopefully, that's the idea. But
Well, I hope so too. And I think I have to give Randy and Brett a lot of credit for the case that I just was completed in, somebody in our town had a business, a consignment store, and they defrauded a lot of the customers. And they were only in business for 3 years, got evicted, shut up shop, didn't pay people, didn't give them the property back, and then tried to file bankruptcy for, and get 400,000 plus thrown out, forgiven. And it was all because of what I learned on Rule of Law Radio and Randy and Brett's encouragement that I filed an adversary proceeding within that bankruptcy. It stopped the Chapter 7 discharge. It took 4.5 years of going through this paperwork and this legal proceedings as a pro se. I brought in 3 other people, but they didn't have the legal knowledge, but they were just very supportive and helping when they could. And I also had the confidence to, because a lot of people had filed with the district attorney's office complaints, and I had the confidence to look up our district attorney online and saw that he had, statements that he had a duty to protect his public, and he was in the military, and he swore an oath there to protect and serve. So I emailed him directly and said, I'm invoking your duty to protect your public. This is what's happening. We are not a bunch of fly-by-nights. We're seniors that have been defrauded. I would like you to look into this. And give him his credit. He responded quickly, and he arranged a meeting. He did not know about this particular case because he said they get 10,000 a year easily, but he was glad I brought it to his attention. She just got sentenced. Now, she didn't get the jail term we wanted. There was a plea deal after 4.5 years, and I think that they gave in a little too easily, but they did follow through. She did get 2 years felony probation. She's a convicted felon, felony embezzlement charges, bad check charges. She supposedly has been ordered to pay restitution, but will we see any of it? No. But she cannot do this to anyone else. She is now a convicted felon. And I give all the credit for being able to do this to Randy and Brett, and also being able to have enough knowledge to call up the bankruptcy help clinic and have the confidence to be able to call up and say, hey, I need a question answering. I need this, I need that. Every Friday I'd be asking another question to help me get through this process. And she went through 8 attorneys, 2 in the adversary proceeding, who both withdrew. So here's pro se litigants winning an adversary proceeding, which less than 1% of people win.
Unbelievable.
And so
Well,
that's the kind of thing you can get.
On that positive note, I think that's a good stopping point. I want to thank you for your service to your fellow man and woman, and I want to thank you for your time you've donated here to help us try to start to unpack what the banks and the federal government have colluded with to harm the people. But with that said, again, thank you, and I'm gonna give you the last word.
Well, no, I just want to thank people like you for helping us put this into the public. And, you have a valuable role in our society to get this kind of information, this kind of fraud out to all the people who need this information, because we can't rely on the big news services. We have to rely on people like you to help us spread the word. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the time to let me, tell my story. As hard as it is, as embarrassing as I once felt, I don't feel that anymore because, I know this has happened to thousands of people. It's happened to firefighters, lawyers, it's happened to people. I know of a vice president of a bank that was defrauded by One West Bank. And if it can happen to a vice president of a bank, it can happen to anybody. And it's people like you who help us get this word out. So thank you for your time too.
Well, we're doing our best, and hopefully it snowballs into something a little bigger. But in the meantime, we'll do what we can where we can. Thank you again for your time.